Today's video showcases the tier 10 heavy tank that I feel is one of the most competitive tier 10 heavy tanks in the game. It is the Super Conqueror, and that is because this tank in its own right has some of the best statistics for a heavy to be able to carry games, to be able to work ridge lines, to be able to just smash your opponents to bits, and that is exactly what you want from a heavy tank, as well as having basically medium tank accuracy both on the move and during movement as well. And that is what makes the Super Conqueror very, very deadly within the game, and hence why we're showcasing it today in the replay. Now, the tank itself heavily relies upon the fact that you get turret armor, hence why the Super Conqueror is known for going hold down on ridge lines and being able to bounce just a ton of rounds from the front of the turret, and that is what makes this thing super hard to take out in the game as well. Now that means that if you can get yourself into a position where you're able to get hold down, which is essentially, or hold down, effectively what you can do is remove the ability to get penned by a lot of the tanks that are going to be coming towards you, and also in the same right be able to consistently hit your opponents very easily. Now what you're seeing me do here is take a kind of a pretty risky approach to a degree, because we don't know what the TDs that are going to be sat at the back are, and we do take a hit from the King Dragon who's poked over the ridgeline probably a little bit too eagerly, but we'll keep an eye on him as we go through this battle to potentially take a nice shot into him. The EBR-75 MLE decides he's going to try and YOLO over, but because of the accuracy of the Super Conqueror, like we've been talking about, is superb, it means that he does take a shot, and of course we do get a little bit lucky setting him on fire and taking him out within just like one shot essentially. One other tank has hit him and he's out of the game by this point. Now one thing that I want to showcase about Overlord is that you can take this ridge line over here and you can dominate. Of course you have to be very careful of the King Dragon, because that's the point at which we did get hit, and that is a common place on this map that you will be getting hit in. Now another thing that I do know is that a lot of players would have just basically YOLO'd in to try and get this E100 or gone too far, but you do have to be very, very careful, very mindful that there is heavy tanks, there is light tanks, there's mediums that typically camp in the positions that you're kind of seeing in the back of the map, and you can get taken out very, very easily within the game. Now one thing that you're seeing here is kind of the reload of the Super Conqueror. It basically allows you to do so much more than what you'd expect with a typical heavy tank, because essentially usually heavy tanks have like 25% more damage per shot than something like a high alpha medium, and therefore you get a pretty bad reload comparatively to the medium tanks, and you get more armor, whereas the Super Conqueror is more like a tank that has a medium gun but also very strong frontal armor as well, so it gets like the best of both worlds in my opinion. Now am I saying that this is flat out broken? Well no, because the hull armor is pretty bad when anyone gets any kind of glimpse of you, but it doesn't really matter, to be honest with you, regarding the hull armor, because you could be playing a medium tank that pretty much has the same alpha damage as this thing. It has the same reload, yet you're playing a heavy tank that can actually deal damage. Now, that's one thing that you cannot discredit about the Super Conqueror and why I enjoy playing this thing so much. You can see the skin on this tank doesn't actually come stock like this. I think you could have got it like about last year ago or something like that, when it came out as a free skin with the Super Conqueror as part of a season pass. But regardless of that, what we can do in this tank is be very aggressive. The Super Conqueror allows you to be quite aggressive, especially if you can get yourself into a position that is kind of best for your tank. Of course, that's the same for any tank. Like, seems like a pretty bog standard phrase, but it really does do like super well if you do get it into that position where you are kind of in the element, where you are hold down, where you can just be super annoying for the opponents, because ultimately that's what kind of wins you games when you're playing in these top tier tanks, when you're playing in things like the Super Conqueror, and why you can do so well in this comparatively to some of the others. Now what you're seeing me do here is be a little bit mindful, because I know that there's a lot of tanks moving over back towards their base. I don't know where the rest of them are. Are they going to be coming up from the C kind of 4 to C7 channel that's kind of there, or am I going to have to go down and try and deal with its Super Conqueror and the Type 5 that are down here, as well as getting some extra damage? Now, having done 2.8 thousand damage within this replay, it's not the worst, but the key thing about water tanks is that it can go from good to very bad very quickly, but we want to make sure that we do a consistent job of remaining kind of somewhat kind of skillful within this, so we don't just throw the game. You can see us picking up the last hit on the Super Conqueror there. Got a tank destroyer behind us, we've got a tank destroyer behind us again, so we've got to deal with one side. You can see that there's an AMX M454 that's there, I think that's the tier 9, and then we've got the medium tank as well, the Object 430-2. Now you see me trying to actually hit him on the move. We don't know what this tank destroyer is, but according to what I've just seen, it is the T110E4. Now the AMX M4, as you can see, is pushing through. We need to get behind this rock. What you see me doing here is actually moving up quite quickly to try and get behind this rock to avoid the E4 shell, whilst also being able to get some shots onto this French Heavy. Now you'll see me loading the premium ammunition for the French Heavy. I don't want to bounce at all, although probably won't work very well. Now you see me pen the lower plate of the AMX here, and you see me actually still using the ridge lines, because effectively that's exactly what you want to be doing. Now I should have opted to go for the cupola of the tank of the AMX, because that would have probably been the better option. I try and go for the tracks to stop him from advancing so quickly. It doesn't work. We're then trying to go for that lower plate, which does work, and now he's actually in a position where he can kind of face hug. Now we're trying to get that lower plate down, but we can't manage to. We're kind of deciding what to do. We can't get the turret. It's actually a very bad situation for the Super Conqueror, and this is one of the situations that I feel like it can be a little bit annoying. Now, am I saying that every single situation when you're in the Super Conqueror is like this? Well, no, but this is definitely not an ideal one. We're firing premium ammunition, which is the best you can possibly fire in this thing, at a tank that should, to all intents and purposes, not be able to pen. Now, he does pen me there. We've got an E4, and from this point we're just trying to remove the amount of damage, well, reduce the amount of damage or increase the amount of damage that we can deal with in this replay to avoid kind of getting hit. We try and get one more into the AMX there, but we don't manage to do it. However, we did pick up 4,760 damage, and albeit I could have shown you like a 7k damage replay, but I don't feel like it's necessarily representative of your average games in the Super Conqueror. This one was definitely more so. Now, the Super Conqueror is one of those that you can definitely do well in. However, it does have some weaknesses, and you could see there that, you know, albeit it does have some decent armor, when you come up against a tank that is fairly well armored like the AMX, from a face hugging perspective, the Super Conqueror can be a bit limited, and they can shoot down onto your upper plate, whereas you can't do too much against them. So that's just one aspect that maybe isn't quite talked about as much as some of the others. Heading off into the next replay here on Kasserine, this is a bit more of a kind of higher tier replay where we do manage to do more damage, but that's kind of what I'm trying to showcase on the channel, is that yeah, I can show like 7k damage replays all of the time if I really wanted to in these tier 10s. It will take me slightly longer to get the replays, but I don't feel it really gives you the value in terms of what you can expect from normal games. Like, it's just probably not realistic, so we're trying to keep it somewhat realistic whilst also showing you, you know, not a game where you do like 400 damage or something stupid. But given the fact that the Super Conqueror has all of the attributes that we've already named, Kasserine is probably not the map that you'd be expecting to be able to do well. And why do I mean that? Well, this tank is a big open map. There are room where you can use your turret, but they're very limited in terms of like being able to consistently stay in those sort of positions throughout the entirety of the game. You do get caught out in the open quite often. I'm not going to say it's all of the time, but that's one thing that you definitely don't want to see, is an FE 4005 round coming straight at you. Luckily, it actually bounces, so we don't take the hit, but that could have been very catastrophic. And we try and go for the Quillin here, which we can basically do since we can get hold down. Very well aware that the FE 4005 is probably reloaded at this point, so we've got to be a little bit careful as to what we're doing. But I love this position at the start in the Super Conqueror, because what you can do from this position is get view range into the people that are going to be pushing up. Now, does that mean that you're always going to be able to get view range? Does it mean you should stay here as soon as you kind of realise that? No. What this position is good is for gauging the beginning of the game, where the enemy tanks are going to be going, where you should be going, what sort of things you want to be doing, and of course getting some early spotting damage, because the view range of the Super Conqueror is not terrible. It's actually not bad, considering this is a heavy tank. And that's kind of one bit that separates it from something like, for example, a Type 5, which is a pure heavy. This is more like a, like we've talked about, like a medium heavy in terms of gun handling, etc, etc. And that's why I love playing the Super Conqueror so much. Now, one thing that you'll note is that for the Super Conqueror to be like really powerful in the games and to be able to consistently become like top in the game, then you have to be quite aggressive, to the point where like you are rushing into scenarios which may not necessarily be 100% favourable for your tank, but sometimes you do have to, because this tank is not the fastest. I'm not going to BS you and say, yeah, the Super Conqueror is super quick and you're going to be able to get into position all of the time to be able to deal damage. It's not the case. There are so many games where sometimes like the damage just isn't there for you to actually take, and you can get kind of left out with that regard. However, one thing that you can do, because of the great reload of the Super Conqueror, is be able to track opponents, because you reload in about approximately 6 seconds, roughly. Of course, it varies depending on the tank that you're in, and what perk setup, equipment setup you've got on your tank. So it's kind of like that, but I feel like you can still do very well, but from assistance damage, which is what is going to boost you up on your marks of excellence. If that is something that you are keen to actually do, it's probably something I'll do in the future, potentially go for my 3rd mark on this tank. But I find it a tank that is very strong, but can be a little bit boring to play. However, in this replay, what we can showcase is that we've dealt nearly 5,500 combined damage already, and it's only going to pile up, especially when you're in corner fights like this. We take 1 shell there, which is unfortunate, but I was expecting to take a shell to the opponent there. Nonetheless, we can just continue to plow on, and that is because of the accuracy on the move. We've talked about it in the first replay, we'll talk about it again. This is the sort of scenario that you want, where you can just go forward, where you don't have to think all too much and you can just dish out damage left, right and centre. Unfortunately, Type 5 is just in the way because he's a big ogre, but at least maybe we'll be able to get 1 more in, which we do manage to do, and of course that's exactly what you want when you're playing in something like this. But I think we've given a good overview as to what this tank can be like in a variety of different situations. There are definitely games where you will rack up so much damage because of the consistent gun handling that this thing has, and there are also games where maybe you get caught out. Maybe that big artillery on the enemy team decides to drop a nice round onto your massive engine deck, and then it's game over. But these 2 replays showcase what the Super Conqueror is like for the most part, and hopefully you did enjoy this video. If you did like the video, and also why don't you check out this video on screen, which showcases some interesting gameplay in one of the most recent tank additions into World of Tanks console. Hope to see you there, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.